Hi, thanks for joining me again on this YouTube series on composition. This video is about three-point composition. It's also called curve composition. So it's a little bit more complicated than the two-point, but I'll try to show you some examples and break it down for you. So here's the first image I want to talk about. It's a concept art painting. So just like the two-point composition, you start with something big in the foreground. And just like I explained in the last video, this foreground helps to lead your eye into the painting. It's a nice way just for the viewer to just feel that there's something close to the camera, and it's sort of the way that you can step into the image. So what this does is it sort of pushes your eye into the image, and it sort of leads you from right to left up to these mountains. But the difference between the two-point and the three-point composition is in the three-point composition, you have a secondary movement that brings you back the opposite direction. So the way that works is you have a strong focal point area, and you sort of use all the lines to guide the viewer into the focal point area. And so it works quite nicely. It's basically just that curve sort of feeling that sort of drags you one way and then brings you back the opposite way in towards the background. So that's this image. I'll show you a few more examples. Firstly, I just want to show you the final matte painting I created after using the concept painting. I went in and textured all the mountains, but as you can see, the composition is still the same. These lines sort of lead you around and then into the painting. So moving on to the next example, here's another matte painting that sort of uses this same composition, but in a different way. So I always like to start with a big foreground element to help just push the viewer into the image. So it acts sort of as that over-the-shoulder shot. It pushes you to one direction of the image. But this being the three-point composition, we try to draw the viewer back the opposite direction into the foreground. So it creates this nice sort of zigzag feeling. You push the viewer in, and then you draw it back to the other way. So that's how it works. And I think it sort of makes the image slightly more complex and can create sort of a circular movement, like your eye comes back here and then gets pushed into here and then back. So it's sort of a cool way to keep the viewer's eye flowing in a circle. This is another concept painting that really uses the same techniques. I always like to have something big in the foreground just to create a nice feeling of depth that really pushes the background towards the back and brings the foreground forward. But using this three-point composition again, we guide the viewer towards a secondary point that draws your attention. But this smokestack really helps to just frame the image and push your eye back in towards the opposite direction. So as you can see, all the lines of the painting are sort of helping to just support this sort of composition. And it's very nice to have a cool cool focal point that really draws your eye and really just pays off the lines into a nice focal point, a nice payoff that has some interesting shapes, and also the sunset, of course, draws your attention as well. So you're almost like telling a story, like allowing the viewer to feel like, okay, they're standing on this beach and they're stepping in and they can follow the path of the water and it draws them towards the left. And then you have the lines curving back towards the background. And that's sort of your main focal point where you want the viewer to look, where all the lines sort of are leading you in towards this nice background scenery. And it just makes your image a little more complex and allows the viewer just to wander through it a little more than the 2-point. This path is definitely a strong guiding line, and it brings you into this nice little waterfall area here. But it's just nice to sort of let the viewer wander back towards the background as well. Sort of feeling the space and the lines and how are they moving. I mean, that's really what it's all about, is creating movement in the image. So that's just a fun way to play around. Same thing we have here. We lead the viewer in from right to left, and you really have this nice sort of lighting and focal point here. But it's nice to have that secondary movement of allowing your viewer to sort of be led towards the background. And everyone sort of experiences the image differently. Some people might look at the background first, their eye might be drawn there, and then they sort of come back. I know a lot of people have said that their eye tends to go to the background first. So whichever way you experience it, the feeling is the same. I think this composition works well because it really just allows the viewer to wander through the image, and you're creating a nice path for the viewer to follow and experience the image. So it's really a fun technique. I hope you can try it out, play with it, see how it works for you, and hopefully you can create some cool stuff with that. So thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.